In this video, we take a look at events that took place in 2003 when Sandee Rozzo, 37, arrived home after a night shift at a bar. She pulled into the garage and was about to get out of the car, but at that moment her boyfriend, who was sleeping on the second floor, heard some loud pops. He went down to the garage, and after what he saw, he called 911. The case was shrouded in darkness. With several suspects, it appeared to be a crime of passion driven by a perverse desire to possess and control Pennell Park, a quaint city on the outskirts of Tampa, Florida, is known for its picturesque beaches and lush landscapes. The community is a mix of wealthy residents and working-class people. While crime in the area is not unheard of, it tends to be more of a petty nature, drunk driving and auto theft being the most common offenses. However, in 2003, an event occurred here that left locals in fear. It was the day after the 4th of July, Saturday night, and neighbors reported hearing pops just after 11. It was the 4th of July weekend, and so it was expected that fireworks and other sounds would be heard for a couple of days. However, the sounds didn't cause anyone much concern until one local resident discovered that the pops were not celebratory. Troy Edwards called 911 and reported that he heard something he thought sounded like firecrackers popping. When he went outside to find the source of the noise, he noticed the garage door was open and saw his girlfriend Sandee bleeding in her car. Rescue workers quickly arrived on the scene, followed by detectives. The car was parked in the garage. See's body was inside, and there was a large amount of blood and broken glass all around. She suffered 8 separate gunshot wounds to various parts of her body, including her head. Initial examination of the crime scene revealed that it was the perpetrator who used a .22 caliber weapon. It appeared that Sandee was ambushed by someone waiting for her or following her to her garage. She was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately passed away. Sandee was left with a daughter who was with her father at the time of the crime. The ambush set up in her own garage as she was returning home from work shocked the public. Although her purse and wallet were untouched, detectives did not believe C's death was accidental. The premeditated nature of the attack with multiple gunshots suggested a personal vendetta rather than a simple random crime. The brutal nature of the attack indicated that Sandee herself was the target, not material gain. At the beginning of the investigation, the detective's main task was to question C's boyfriend Troy. It is not uncommon in murder cases for suspicion to fall on the victim's loved ones, or those who know the victim well. Troy, being close to Sandee, may have had important information. When the police first tried to talk to him, he was nowhere to be found. He had left the scene, which struck the detectives as odd. It was later discovered that Troy had headed to the hospital, but his behavior was suspicious because he had locked up the house before leaving. This action seemed odd due to the presence of numerous police officers who were still doing their job. Why was he persistently preventing access to the house? What was he trying to hide? Detectives sought to get to the bottom of these questions. Although his actions could have been the reaction of a confused or frightened man, detectives called Troy in for questioning. He seemed upset, which was expected. He claimed that the last time he saw Sandee was when she left for work. Due to their mismatched work schedules, Troy worked during the day and Sandee worked at night. Troy explained that on the morning of July 5th, he left for work at 5 a.m. while Sandee was still asleep when he got home at 2 p.m. He and Sandee talked briefly, after which she went to her job as a bartender at the popular Green Iguana bar in Tampa. She was supposed to finish around 11 p.m. That night, Troy mentioned that he heard her car pull up, and shortly after 11 p.m., around 11:10, he heard what he thought were clappers. He went to the garage to check on Sandee, where he found her unconscious with numerous wounds. He tried to bring her to her senses, but was unable to do so and called 911. During the interrogation, Troy was asked about his relationship with Sandee. He described their connection as romantic, expressing his deep love for her. He spoke well of Sandee, mentioning her beauty and the wonderful daughter she had. He even mentioned plans to marry Sandee. When Troy was asked about C's possible enemies, he shared a disturbing detail. She warned him that if anything bad happened to her, Tracy Humphrey would be responsible. According to him, the man was C's ex-boyfriend and posed a danger because after breaking up with Sandee, Tracy had assaulted her. Despite Troy's testimony, the police found no record of Tracy Humphrey in criminal databases, raising questions about the credibility of Troy's words. During the interview, investigators noticed cuts on Troy's hands, legs, and feet. He explained that he had cut himself on broken glass while trying to pull Sandee out of the car. This called Troy's honesty into question and gave rise to speculation about the possibility of his involvement in the incident. The mention of Tracy Humphrey seemed like a ploy to divert attention away from the true culprit. Nevertheless, Tracy Humphrey remained an important figure in the case, but Troy could not be ruled out as a suspect. Either in investigating Sandee Rozzo's murder, detectives reached out to her friends and family in an effort to reconstruct the chronology of the last hours of her life. They made inquiries about C's relationship with Jesse, the father of her daughter. There were signs of tension in their relationship, possibly related to child custody issues. At the time of C's death, her daughter was living with her father in Alabama. Jesse was financially supporting his daughter and possibly seeking sole custody. This raised suspicions about his involvement in C's murder, as child custody disputes can sometimes lead to criminal behavior. To gather more information, detectives traveled to Alabama and spoke with Jesse. During the conversation, Jesse denied any involvement in C's death. Detectives decided to bring him in for questioning at the local police station. At the station, Jesse continued to insist on his innocence, claiming that Sandee had played a significant role in their daughter's life and that he had no reason to want the mother of their child dead. He was asked about where he was on the evening of July 5th when the crime was committed. Jesse claimed that he was at home that evening watching movies with his daughter and girlfriend when he received a phone call around 1 a.m. informing him of C's tragic death. To confirm Jesse's alibi, investigators gathered more information, including DNA samples, fingerprints, and his cell phone records. Jesse's cell phone records indicated that he was outside of Florida when the crime was committed. Now that Jesse has been cleared of suspicion, detectives are focusing their attention on the Green Iguana, where Sandee was working the night of her murder. The Green Iguana is a popular bar known for its lively nightlife. Sandee often socialized with the regulars. Investigators interviewed all of her co-workers, especially those who had worked with her the night of the crime, looking for new leads. The people she worked with were shocked and angry when they found out what had happened to Sandee. Everyone who knew her liked her, so they were deeply upset by the news of her death. On the evening of the incident, none of the co-workers noticed anything unusual inside the bar. Sandee left work around 10:45 p.m. and a witness saw her leaving the parking lot shortly thereafter. To piece together the chronology of C's last day, investigators traced her path from work to her home, which took approximately 25 minutes. This meant she should have arrived home around 11:10 p.m. This chronology suggested that Sandee went straight home after leaving work. Investigators began questioning C's co-workers about her personal life. While Troy, the man she lived with, described their relationship as solid, her co-workers painted a different picture. They mentioned that Sandee sometimes felt like she was just Troy's roommate rather than a girlfriend. This information suggested that Sandee may have considered breaking up with Troy. The detectives began to focus on Troy again, as it became apparent that he was telling one story while C's friends and co-workers were telling another. Colleagues at the Green Iguana mentioned that Sandee had planned to discuss with Troy the possibility of dating other people. Troy's feelings may have been hurt, causing him to act irrationally and hurt Sandee. Sandee was grateful for the stability Troy provided, but it seemed she didn't love him as much as he wanted her to. This unrequited love could have been the motive for the crime, a classic case of crime of passion, where the perpetrator believes, if I can't have you, no one can. When detectives questioned Troy again, he appeared distraught but cooperated with the investigation. However, it is not uncommon for suspects to feign innocence and cooperate fully with the police in an attempt to deflect suspicion. With Troy now at the center of the investigation, the detectives diligently searched for any evidence linking him to S's murder. They thoroughly searched both Troy's car and his home, but found no weapons or any other items that raised suspicion. The detectives then talked to Troy about his relationship with Sandee, informing him that her co-workers had painted a far from perfect picture. Troy was visibly shocked by the accusations. He believed that their relationship was more serious and was unaware of Sandee's true feelings. Even though Sandee may have been planning to leave him, Troy insisted that his love for her remained unchanged. To corroborate Troy's story, detectives reviewed the chronology of events. Establishing a clear timeline was critical. They were able to confirm that Sandee arrived home around 11:10 p.m., which matched Troy's description of hearing gunshots, finding Sandee in the garage, and calling 911. Troy's behavior seemed consistent with that of a man who witnessed the tragic death of his loved one. After a thorough investigation, law enforcement ruled Troy out as a suspect in the crime. After that, it seemed like the investigation had reached a dead end. Who else could have had the motivation to commit such a heinous act? Who would want to harm Sandee, who was just trying to save money and build her life? Fortunately, the detectives got some unexpected help when Troy discovered a folder belonging to Sandee in his home. Troy believed the folder contained important information, and he was right. The folder was sealed with C's handwritten notes detailing her upcoming trial against a man she accused of assault and unlawful imprisonment. Sandee was to testify in a Tampa courtroom against a man named Timothy Humphrey. The trial was scheduled to take place in August, just a month after C's murder. Troy had previously told police that C's ex-boyfriend's name was Tracy Humphrey. Documentation in the file revealed that his real name was Timothy. This yielded important information, including his date of birth and other personal details that were the first clue to solving the case. There was no information about Tracy Humphrey in the databases, but there was a lot of information about Timothy Humphrey. Further investigation revealed that Timothy Humphrey, better known as Tracy Humphrey, had a disturbing history of assaulting women. In fact, he served an 8-year prison sentence for these crimes. The most disturbing revelation was that Tracy had kidnapped Sandee, held her captive, and over the course of several days repeatedly forced Sandee to please him. Fearing for her life, Sandee managed to escape and was found naked and beaten by a sheriff's deputy. Tracy threatened to kill her if she reported the assault. As he was facing jail time for his actions, despite her fear, Sandee was willing to testify against Tracy in court. Investigators had strong evidence, including DNA photographs and C's testimony. However, everything in this case depended on C's testimony. If she couldn't testify, the charges would likely be dropped. This gave Tracy a strong motive to silence her, so he became the prime suspect in the investigation. A handwritten note left by Sandee directly identified Tracy as a potential threat. Armed with this new information, detectives located Tracy at a gym in the neighboring city of Brandon, where he resided and worked as a personal fitness trainer. Known for his strong build and commitment to fitness, Tracy was often referred to as Mr. Clean due to his bald head earring in his ear and commanding appearance. While talking to detectives, Tracy seemed surprised to learn of C's murder, but his evasive demeanor raised suspicions. When asked about his relationship with Sandee, Tracy was defensive and refused to answer further questions without his attorney present. Detectives noticed that Tracy was wearing a wedding ring, indicating that he must have gotten married not too long ago, as there was no record of his marriage in the databases. Turns out he married a woman named Ashley Laney. Ashley was considerably younger than Tracy. He was 39, while she was only 20. Detectives were hoping Tracy's new wife would provide more information, so they went to their home to talk to her. Upon entering the home, detectives noticed that Ashley was starting to get nervous. However, she revealed that she and Tracy were married on July 4th. It was an amazing coincidence, because the day after their wedding, July 5th, Sandee Rozzo was murdered. Under Florida law, spouses cannot be compelled to testify against each other in criminal cases. This fact made detectives suspicious of the timing of Ashley and Tracy's marriage. They found the timing of the marriage to be a compelling and troubling signal. When Ashley was asked about Tracy's whereabouts on the night of the murder, she stated that she knew nothing about the crime. During her conversation with detectives, Ashley willingly provided her alibi for the night of C's murder. She stated that on the night of the murder at 11 p.m., she and Tracy were at home watching a movie and eating pizza. Ashley mentioned that their friend Toby White had also visited their home that evening. However, the conversation took an unexpected turn when Ashley received a call from her attorney. Tracy contacted the lawyer and told him to call Ashley and explained to her how she should behave if she was contacted by detectives. Then something else strange happened. To everyone's surprise, Tracy returned home and forbade Ashley from answering the detectives' questions. His demeanor, body language, and facial expressions indicated anger and frustration. This planted a suspicion in the minds of the detectives that there may have been a conspiracy to cover up the truth about Sandee Rozzo's murder, and Tracy may have been involved, although Ashley had gone silent. The detectives had an important new lead. The alibi provided by Ashley and Tracy Humphrey for the night of Sandee Rozzo's murder was that they had ordered pizza. Following this lead, the detectives visited the pizza parlor, found the delivery driver, and picked up the receipt. The pizza was ordered using Tracy's cell phone at 10:49 p.m. On July 5th, the pizza was delivered 15 minutes afterward. The pizza delivery driver quickly recalled that night, mentioning that the bald large guy had given him a $20 tip for a $12 pizza. Since Tracy's home was a 40-minute drive from the crime scene, detectives concluded that he could not have been the killer. This discovery was a disappointment to the detectives, as they suspected Tracy. The pieces of the puzzle did not fit together the way they expected. A setback like the one associated with a confirmed alibi can be discouraging. However, in this particular situation, he decided to look into Ashley's involvement in what happened to Sandee. During further investigation, the detectives uncovered an intriguing incident. Ashley was a good student and a person of good behavior with no criminal record. However, shortly before S's death, she reported her car stolen. Ironically, her car was later found on a street in Tampa, completely burned out. The state fire marshal's office concluded that the car had been intentionally set on fire. Police investigated the arson and discovered that on the same day Ashley's car was set on fire, she had visited a shoe range in the Tampa area. It turned out that Ashley Humphrey had been at the range with Tracy Humphrey, where she was learning to shoot a .22 caliber weapon. This information was crucial because the gun that killed Sandee was also a .22 caliber. Detectives began to correlate all of the information they received and delve deeper into Ashley's involvement in C's murder. They talked to her family to gather more information. Ashley's stepfather told detectives that he owned a .22 caliber handgun and had loaned it to Ashley because she wanted to learn how to shoot. He asked for the gun back, but Ashley did not return it. When detectives spoke to Ashley's mother, they no longer had any doubt that they were taking the investigation in the right direction. The mother said Ashley had informed her that Sandee had been shot 8 times. This detail was significant because it had not been reported in the media, indicating that only law enforcement and the shooter would have been privy to this information. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, indicating Ashley's involvement in the crime. However, the motive for S's murder remained unclear, except for a potential connection to Tracy. By obtaining the phone records of Tracy Humphrey and Ashley Humphrey, investigators were able to pinpoint the exact location of Tracy's phone at the time of the crime. The phone tower data showed that his phone was located near his residence in Brandon. Although the records confirmed Tracy's alibi, they contradicted Ashley's statement that she had been home all night. Her phone was active outside the Green Iguana around 4:30 p.m., and she called Tracy several times later around 10:45 p.m. Her phone was tracked near C's house. The evidence strongly suggested Ashley's involvement In the crime, Ashley was now the prime suspect. However, detectives suspected that she wasn't acting alone. The phone records also pointed to Tracy's involvement in the crime, as he had a motive to harm Sandee. The only question now was what role each of them had played in the crime. Looking for more evidence, detectives turned their attention to Toby White, a friend who had visited Tracy and Ashley's home the night Sandee Rozzo was murdered. Detectives called her in for questioning. Turns out Toby was a client of Tracy Humphrey. She thought Tracy was a good trainer. When Toby was asked about her whereabouts on the evening of July 5th, she initially corroborated Tracy's account, claiming she had been at his house from 9:30 p.m. to midnight, even mentioning the pizza delivery they had ordered. However, upon further examination of cell phone records, it became clear that Toby was not present in the house during that time. Toby was confronted with inconsistencies in her testimony. Perjury is an offense that can result in jail time. Faced with the possibility of criminal charges, Toby recanted her original statement and told the truth. She informed detectives that she had not seen Ashley or Tracy Humphrey that evening and provided a false alibi at Tracy's request. In retrospect, Toby realized that Tracy and Ashley had deceived her about their involvement in the murder. On December 18, 2003, Ashley Humphrey was arrested for the first-degree murder of Sandee Rozzo. Tracy Humphrey, a convicted felon, was prohibited from possessing or using firearms, making it impossible for him to handle firearms at a firing range. As a result, Tracy was arrested on these charges and held in custody to make sure he could not influence Ashley, because Ashley was in custody and away from Tracy. Detectives hoped she would provide more information about the crime, but she remained silent. Fear of Tracy's potential influence over her was a serious concern, given his history of abuse. Detectives dug deeper into Tracy's past in hopes of uncovering information that might get Ashley to talk. They were able to find information that Tracy had been cheating on Ashley, and not just with women. As Ashley began to piece together the truth, she realized that her entire relationship, including her marriage, had been built on deception and lies. Sitting in jail, Ashley couldn't escape the question of whether she had been manipulated. All along, the shocking revelation that the man she'd committed a crime for, the man she was willing to spend a lifetime in prison for, was cheating on her, forced Ashley to change tactics. Feeling betrayed, Ashley confessed to C's murder and provided detectives with crucial information about the location of the murder weapon. The gun was recovered in Northeast Hillsborough County. As Ashley continued to speak with investigators, she uncovered increasingly disturbing details. Tracy had manipulated her from the beginning, convincing her that he loved her and that in order for them to have a future together, Sandee had to be eliminated. According to Tracy, he had been falsely accused and was facing jail time if Sandee testified in court. Ashley also confessed to a previous attempt on C's life that had occurred weeks before the fatal incident. The revelation of these dark truths painted a chilling picture of manipulation, deception, and betrayal. Ashley had originally planned to shoot Sandee. As she left the bar, she sat in her car in the parking lot waiting for Sandee to finish her shift and walk out into the parking lot to drive home. Ashley waited until Sandee came out of the bar and pulled the trigger. The problem for Ashley was that she didn't hit Sandee. She shot the mirror on her own car. This incident left behind compromising evidence. To eliminate the evidence, Ashley and Tracy drove the car to a vacant lot and set it on fire. As more and more evidence linking Tracy to the crime emerged, law enforcement became more confident in their ability to charge him with murder. Ashley was just a pawn in Tracy's scheme. He manipulated her into carrying out his plan to eliminate Sandee. Tracy Humphrey was the mastermind behind the tragic events that unfolded. Without his influence, Sandee would still be alive and Ashley would not have committed the crime. Thanks to Ashley's confession, investigators were able to reconstruct the timeline of the last hours of Sandee Rozzo's life. On the day of the murder, July 5th, Sandee started work at the Green Iguana at 2:30 p.m. While she worked at the bar, Ashley waited in the parking lot with a .22 caliber handgun borrowed from her stepfather. All the while, Tracy was in constant communication with Ashley, coordinating her actions. Ashley waited patiently for Sandee to finish her shift. Sandee pulled out of the parking lot at 10:45 p.m. and Ashley followed her. Sandee arrived home at 11:10 p.m. Had parked her car in the garage. Ashley entered right behind her. She started shooting. She continued firing until she ran out of ammunition. She fired a total of 8 shots. After that, the first thing Ashley did was to call Tracy and tell him that Sandee was dead. Tracy ordered a pizza and gave the delivery guy a good tip so he would remember him. That gave Tracy an alibi in exchange for her cooperation. Ashley took a plea bargain, 25 years in prison, in exchange for testifying against Tracy Humphrey. Many questioned the fairness of Ashley's sentence, suggesting that a life sentence would have been more appropriate. On March 10, 2006, Ashley Humphrey was sentenced to 25 years in prison. 14 years later, she made a sensational confession. Ashley Humphrey admitted to Piers Morgan on ATV's Killer Women that she came up with the plan to kill Sandee Rozzo, and it wasn't her husband Timothy Tracy Humph idea. As she had testified in court, I suggested, what if she were not to show up in court? Ashley said, that is where it started, and it snowballed. I was the first to say it. I don't know why I let him into my head the way I did. Had Ashley confessed initially to the plan and not taken a plea bargain to convict her husband, she could have been given a far worse sentence. She is currently incarcerated At Gaudon Correctional Institution in Quincy, Florida, her release from prison is scheduled for December 13, 2028, when she will be 46 years old. In February 2006, a jury found Timothy Humphrey guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. He received an additional sentence of 15 years for attempted escape. Humphrey's overbearing and violent nature led him to believe that he could escape justice. However, he would spend the rest of his days behind bars, eventually meeting his end there. This was the outcome that everyone in Sandee Rozzo's family wanted.